It's 12:05 on this Wednesday afternoon here at 90.3 FM, and it's Wednesday, as we said, helping seniors of Brevard, Joe Steckler Day. And right now, here's the host of the show, Joe Steckler. Hi, Joe.
Hi, John. Thank you very much. With me in the studio here is Kerry Fink of TYG Media. Kerry is on the show as much as I am. And,
right.
And the guy we're going to pick on today is our elder law attorney, Bill Johnson, who is going to talk about some new things in the law and everything. But before we start, I'd just like to remind everybody that if you have a question about what we talk about, you always call us on 722-9998 here at WEJF 90.3 FM. We'll answer your questions. If we can't answer it, we'll get it answered for you and tell you next week. But the purpose of helping seniors is to inform, educate, and connect seniors with resources that they need. And we're finding in this business of this pandemic, COVID or coronavirus, whatever you want to call it, we've got problems. And some people recognize it. Some people just refuse to recognize it. And for a long time, I was reluctant to wear a mask, but I certainly believe in it now. And, you know, if you don't care whether you get this COVID thing or not yourself, think about the other people. And you wearing the mask helps protect the people you're around. And our commissioners just voted this week to not enforce wearing of the mask. And John Tobias was the only one that dissented. The other four all voted to not require a mandatory thing. And I just think that sometimes when it gets to the point where you're worried about the whole society here in Brevard County protection, we've got a problem, and if people don't want to do the right thing, then I think that it's the responsibility of the commissioners to step up and say, yeah, you got to do it. It's just a thing that I think helps people get around better, and stand outside of a store or sit in a car and watch people going in or coming out. About half have masks on, about half don't. And the sad part about it, unless you get tested, you don't really know whether you have the bug or not. And we're seeing an uptick in all this stuff here in Florida now. And one of the reasons I think it's happening is because more people are getting tested. And as you get tested, you find out people have this thing, and so the numbers are going to go up. But, you know, I could talk about this all day long because I think it's a subject that people need to think about. And I just like to ask Kerry and Bill their thoughts on wearing masks and doing some of these things before we get into the discussion of legal issues, because I think sometimes it helps to know how other people feel about what we do. Bill, what would you comment on it?
Well, at my office, we deal with a large amount of seniors, so we have a lot of precautions in place. Masks, we spray down everything with disinfectant. We now have a plexiglass barrier that sits between me and the clients at the table. And we also have a thermometer now, a touchless thermometer. So we take it very seriously. And, you know, given that I do elder law and I deal with seniors day in, day out, who are the most vulnerable, we have to take those precautions.
Kerry?
Yeah, and I agree. I think the point that they explain about the mask, because I guess we've been getting conflicting information, whether it helps, whether it doesn't help, depends on who you're listening to. But the one thing that does seem to be clear, the advantage of having a mask is you are trying to protect the people around you. So if you care about the people around you, it would seem that you would want to wear the mask regardless of what somebody tells you to do. And it does appear that some of the uptick seems to be from people forgetting that rule, because they, particularly they say that the younger folks are more asymptomatic, but just as contagious. And so if that's the case, and like you and Bill are saying, when we're talking about seniors who are the most vulnerable populations, we really want to look after them. We did a Helping Seniors update on Monday with Charisse Durham over at Hibiscus Court. And they had just posted recently that so far through all of this, they've been able to stay COVID-free at Hibiscus because of all the various things. But she said, nobody knows day after day because people are out, and if they all do the things to be careful, then we shouldn't have a problem. But I guess it's if we let our guard down, that's when we might invite those problems in.
Well, take along that line, Bill, you were going to talk about some of the changes in the legal system over the last few months or last year. But one of the things I see there is when we talk about, and that's talking about the electronic documents and cell phone recordings and things like that. It seems like those type of things would also be a great aid in helping cut down on this coronavirus thing.
That's a great segue, Joe, because you're all right. A lot of these things have a lot of useful applications in a time frame where you don't want to be in large groups.
Well, what are some of the things, Bill, that you're seeing changed? And if you want to talk about,
well, there's a big change today, actually, and in Florida today, July 1st, you can do electronic documents, meaning you can have your will, your power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, living will, all sent to you via your computer, and then from that point, you can have your witnesses and notary come in via the computer, and you sign those documents electronically on your screen. And then those documents are notarized and witnessed electronically, and all your documents are then stored in a digital file. And you can do all that without having to leave your house. So, and without having to bring witnesses and notaries in, or the attorney even in, and that is available as of today. Now, I don't know if there's any services out there doing all that right now, because this is fairly brand new. It was passed in the 2019 legislative session, so that, even though it was 2 years ago, it didn't go into effect until today. Earlier this year, you were able to do electronic notarizations, and that went into effect at January 1. But now you can do wills and trusts and all those other documents that you may want to do, and it can all be done without leaving your house.
So does that mean, I just want to ask this question. So like when you talked about notarizing something, does that mean that you can have the notary on your end at the attorney's office, and the person can say, well, I need to sign this document, and I'm in a hospital, I'm in a facility, I'm in a home, wherever I'm at, but you can have a notary on your end go, yep, that's them signing that?
Yes, you can do it remotely. There are things that have to be done. For some documents, you have to ask a series of questions to gauge the competency of the person. You also have to, when we're dealing with wills and trusts and things like that, there's a series of questions to make sure they're not subject to undue influence, because you may be seeing them, but there may be somebody off screen holding a gun to their head.
Right, right.
So they have to answer who's in the room, And the one downside, I will tell you this, is that it is not available if you are a vulnerable adult. Which
wait,
means
what did you say?
it's not available if you're a vulnerable adult. Okay, so that means that we cannot do these documents remotely for vulnerable adults, which, to go back to your question, takes out most people at assisted living and nursing homes.
Well, I was going to say, I remember a couple of years ago, Joe, when we were working on some grant things, and they said It had to do with the FHA or the rules about that, and they said if you're over 62, we already believe you're a vulnerable adult. That's all you have to do to prove that you're in need of these services. If you're over 62, it was like just based on your age, you meet that criteria. What makes a vulnerable adult for purposes of this?
For purposes of this is somebody who needs assistance with activities of daily living.
Okay.
So, obviously, if you're in an assisted living facility, 99% of the people there require that. If you're in a nursing home, it's even more obvious.
Yeah. So, because I've seen a lot of times when if you go to a nursing home or something like that, oftentimes you'll see a family member asking. I guess you must make from time to time travels in because somebody needs something signed before this all happened, but that still has to happen now, even with the electronic side of it.
Well,
I think there is we talked, I think, about workarounds. How do you get around that? And we've worked on the workarounds where if somebody was in a nursing home or something like that, what we do is have the documents go in, they bring the person to the window, and then the notary and the witnesses are on the other side of the window.
Right.
And they can see them sign, but they're not in any position to contaminate the individual. They sign everything, the documents come back out, the witness and notary sign, and then you're off and running. Wow. In Florida, we have a line of sight rule that to witness and notarize, you have to be in the line of sight and be able to see it. There is not a requirement that you be in the same room.
Uh-huh.
So, at my office, I think we talked about this, one of the other shows, is that we have an option. You can drive up in your car and stay in your car. And we'll give you the documents. You sign them in your car. The witnesses and notary are down the sidewalk watching you sign. And then, somebody will approach with a mask and gloves on, and you keep the pen and
right.
That kind of thing. So there have been some very inventive workarounds.
Joe, what do you've been involved in all these processes for years and years. How do you see this affecting all of this?
Well, that's a tough question because I was just thinking of some questions I wanted to ask Bill, and I see some of the changes that Bill is saying, making it a lot easier for families that have loved ones that are a patient it's difficult for them to move around and get around, and by virtue of the fact that this new law has come into place, it makes it a heck of a lot easier for people to be able to put things in place and get things done. And I think that's a great big asset. What Bill is talking about. I'm just amazed at times at the things that Bill talks about on the show. That it's just like us trying to get the word out about getting people to read my columns in the paper or watch our television shows or listen to our radio shows here where you'll pick up things that are going to make it easier for you to do the things that need to be done. And I just, every time we get Bill to talking here, it just makes it a heck of a lot easier for people to get around and do things and take care of business that they might not have done because they simply found it too difficult to get their loved one out of the house. And this makes a big difference, I think, Bill.
Yeah, it does. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it's the wave of the future. Everything's going electronic and remote and everything. And, we saw that coming 2 years ago. So the elder law section actually supported this legislation, even though that's kind of counterintuitive because, a lot of people will not use lawyers to do this.
Right.
But we thought it was important that everybody have the documents, however they get them, and this would allow more people to have them.
Well, one time Bill sent me an edition of the elder law minutes. It was like a paper they put out every month. And I read that thing, and I got so many different ideas for shows. And I asked Bill to send those things to me every month or whenever he got them. He's been about 85% effective in sending them to me. Sometimes he forgets. But every one that he sends to me, I save, because I found over the years in things that have to do with seniors, there are changes that we put in place now that we actually started years and years ago, and we say a foundation for the base and what the changes to the laws are now, and it's something that it's not really rocket science. It's listening to what the needs of people are, and I would imagine that this new electronic thing on wills and doing all this stuff, that applies to grants and trusts and all things like that, does it, Bill?
It can, yeah. You can electronically sign a lot of things. In fact, we don't actually file the paperwork anymore with the court system. We sign it and then scan it in and email it in.
Wow.
So, I mean, everything's being done electronically at the courthouse as well.
So a question that I was thinking about, because you said it before about the undue influence part. Especially Joe, you have, again, so much experience in this, and Bill, you do too. How do you take the good steps to make sure that if somebody is doing this, that you feel comfortable that there's nothing nefarious going on for the person you're trying to help?
Well, there's a case called the Carpenter case, and it outlines what undue influence is. And it talks about, did somebody drive them to the lawyer's office? Did somebody make arrangements to have this done on their behalf? Does this person know the contents of the will ahead of time? Does this person know, or are they present at signing? And that kind of stuff. So there's a litany of questions you can look at and see to whether or not somebody is unduly influencing somebody's decision.
I think back that a good answer I could give it, Kerry, is that years ago when I first got into this business, and I was still learning, and I had a family I know that lived over in Satellite Beach, and they called me up and told me what had happened with their placement of a person in a home, and this nursing home had required an upfront payment, and they required some other payments. And the long and the short was they had overbilled this family by a factor of $30,000.
Wow!
And I didn't go to any attorneys or anything, because I knew what they had done with the nursing home had done. It was incorrect. And I called the home owner and I said, unless that money is returned, and I'll give you a week to do it, then I will expose this, and I'll go to an attorney and make sure that the world knows what you're doing and how you're billing people. And I said, you need to give that money back. I said, and charge them due charges, not what you think is you're just trying to make extra money. They gave the money back.
Good.
They really did. And I look back now, and I probably, in hindsight, Bill, probably would have been better off for me to go to an attorney and make a official report so that the legal authorities would have known about it.
Well, whatever works.
Right. Well, another thing is I was, Jennifer Helen of Seniors Helping Seniors was our guest last week, and she was talking about their experiences. There are certain places that they can go in. I'm talking about assisted livings or things like that. She goes, the policy isn't really uniform. She said there's places that we can go into and the family can go into. He said then there's other places that I go to where our people can go in, but the family's not allowed. And I was thinking about. Then I was also talking not long ago with Robin Feemister, and she was explaining the complexity of what she has to do as a guardian in terms of all these restrictions about getting things signed. Now, that goes back to what you were saying. If you're a vulnerable adult, you're still going to have to make all those kind of accommodations, isn't that?
We are, yeah.
Bill, I think you've been practicing. Well, I don't know how long you've been practicing, but how long have you been practicing on Brevard County? When did you start?
I started in 1991.
Wow.
Okay, so and I got here in 1988, and you were one of the first people I got involved in anything here with seniors, and you've been doing it ever since. But one of the things that I found was that there were so many things I didn't know, and there were ways to get to people to help them understand, and I just get amazed at times at the things that people need to know that they don't know.
Well, I agree with you. That's why we do these shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we do the shows, but now our big task is to get the people to listen to the show. And let's just say there are 500 people listening to the show today. At any one time there could be 1,000, 2,000. You don't know. We don't know. But if just 15 or 20 of those people told a friend about the show and said, "Hey, I heard a place where you get some good information. Why don't you listen to it and see what you think about it?" We need our listeners to tell people about this show so that they can be better informed, and they can let us know some of the things that they want us to know. So we got about 3 minutes before we're going to take our break, folks. But there was one thing Bill had put down on his sheet that he wanted to talk about, and this really intrigued me, was spy cameras.
Okay, well, spy cameras, I don't necessarily mean it in the sense that you're going to put up a camera and spy on people somehow.
I thought it was going to be something good.
But there is a trend now. They call them granny cams.
Right.
And what they're doing is setting up these cameras in people's assisted living rooms, their nursing home rooms, or even at their houses, so they can track what is going on at the house when they're not there. And there's been several cases where they've caught some very horrific acts on camera that nobody would know about unless they had that set up.
Wow.
So they're looking probably this next legislative session, because in Florida, you can video record somebody, but you cannot record their voice without their consent. And there may be some exception to that they can carve out for these kind of cameras, but we used to call them baby cams too.
Right.
The same kind of thing, where you have a camera in the baby's crib, and you can see and hear the baby when you're in a different room, and if something happens, you know about it. And but they've been using these now. People have been putting them in, and I know of at least 2 sexual assault cases.
Oh, dear Lord.
Where the patients have been attacked, and it was, if they didn't have these cameras, they wouldn't have caught them. And so there is a lot of usefulness from having this camera technology that goes through the internet available.
Folks, there's some more questions I want to ask Bill about spy cameras, but we're at the break point of the show. We got to wrap it up just for a few minutes here. But stay with us, because I want to talk some more about spy cameras. I got some other interesting things that I'd like to know about computers and stuff like that. So we'll see what our attorney can tell us. Stay with us, folks.
It's Wednesday, and as we always like to say, that means it's Joe Steckler Day, helping seniors of Brevard. And let's get back to the show. Once again, here's your host, Joe Steckler.
Thank you, John, and welcome back, listeners, to the second half of today's show. I get a big kick out at times of doing shows and things, and I think that I've enjoyed Bill's comments on different things. We go all the way back to the early 90s, and I think what I've learned about the law and about what we need to think about, and why we need to think about some of these changes, because the things that Bill has brought to the show over the years, I've been able, when I get a call, many times I've been able to tell people what Bill said, And not only do they pay attention and listen, they often call Bill, and it's it's like a doctor-patient relationship. I think the relationship between the attorney and his client is privileged information there, but also the ease with which an attorney can help a client understand something. And I've gone to Bill over the years with some very complicated things, and he's made them simple. And that's really important in understanding what we're talking about here. And when we're talking about the stuff that we're talking about today, the other parts that we didn't mention when we get into this spy camera stuff also have to do with social media things. And the one thing that I don't do that my wife does all the time are text messages, and I do emails. And I think, Bill, about all the emails that I send over the internet to people, and Lord knows I don't know how many people could take what I say, and so I try to be very careful what I say in my emails.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago where we didn't, you'd have to write a letter, put a stamp on it, send it out. It would take several days to get to where it was supposed to go. And then all of a sudden, overnight, we have instant communication pretty much no matter where you are. And people can get a hold of you, text you, they can email you. They can now send you documents. We get files that all the time that are scanned in and sent to us, attached to emails. And it's amazing how quick the world has moved all of a sudden.
But how secure are those documents? And when does a person have to be careful about what they're sending over the internet or emails? How do you know what to do?
Well, I'll tell you, the sending part's easy because it's outgoing. The incoming part is where you have all kinds of problems, because there are a lot of different people out there who intend malice towards you and try to get you to open emails by posing as banks and or other institutions, even the government. And once you open that email, boom, you let a virus in your computer. So you really, at your end, have to have some good antivirus software that's going to go through all these emails that are coming in to make sure you're not sending anything malicious along with your message.
Well, I know that the computer systems are very, very complicated. They're simple. We think they're simple, but there's some complicated inner workings of the mechanism, like you talk about a clock and its inner workings. And Kerry, you've dealt with this so much, and I ask you very complicated questions about emails and sending stuff. But between you and Bill with the legal aspect part of it, what have you seen when your work with radio and now with television, and what you put on a radio? What are your thoughts about something that I'm asking Bill?
So, well, when it comes to this question about emails, I think Bill is saying it 100% correctly, because the problem is that is just in the old days when you would go to your mailbox and they would tell you to look out for certain things that might be scams in your mailbox. Now it's the same thing. It's just scams in your inbox for your email. And so they usually take several forms. There's the one that, if you remember, we talked about on the radio that Jennifer had heard about through the Brevard triad, where I guess it's the update on the Nigerian lottery scam. But basically, somebody has received some money because of the coronavirus thing, and they need your help to facilitate it, because whatever the issue is, the bank, and then they get your information, and then they get maybe even you to help pay some administrative fees and things like that in exchange for sharing their good fortune with you. And as sad as it is, people do get taken in by these things all the time, and that's just one. That's one example of that. The other thing that happens a lot of times, and it's called phishing, PHISH, phishing. And what it is where somebody sends you an email, and what their attempt to do is they're going phishing. They're phishing for your information so they can use it for some nefarious purpose later on. So as an example, you might get something, we're concerned that your bank account has been hacked. Please click this link right away so that we can be sure that this is you. Well, you can't be sure it's them. So the best solution, of course, is to pick up the phone and call your bank directly from a number that you have on a bank statement, not from a number that was provided with the email, until you're able to prove that the email comes from who it said it was coming from. And so a lot of these things, it's the same common sense that you would use with anything that you received in the mail or something, or somebody accosted you on the street and asked you these questions. You have to have that same level of skepticism when you're going through your emails as well. And the problem is these guys are good these days. They look really official.
And just so you're clear on this, the bank and the government aren't going to call you.
Right.
They will send stuff in the mail to you. They're not going to call you. They're not more often than not, they're not even going to email you.
Right.
And if you do get an email or something from there that they need to be contacted, pick up your phone and you call the local office.
Right.
And you can verify very quickly whether or not this is a legitimate email.
The other thing I would comment on is that, and I know this to be true, perhaps the two of you have seen it too, the documents that are emailed to you and sometimes mailed to you, well, not mailed so often, but not with email mostly now, that contains stuff reportedly from the IRS. And they make the documents look so official. And sometimes the verbiage you put in there is so scary to the person that reads it. They act on it, and I'd say 99 and 9/10% of the time, you're acting on something that you shouldn't be acting on. You should just not pay attention to it at all.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because one of the things is, again, if they can get your attention, which is the point, engage the conversation. And we've seen the same thing when they talk about the telephone scams. They say you got to just hang up on them, because their intention is to make sure they get the banking account information. Because think about it, and Bill, this way better than I would from even a legal standpoint. If somebody gains control over your bank account, they can do all sorts of mayhem before you get a chance to even get in there and sort it out.
They can. Lots of mayhem.
I was having some trouble with my computer about 2 weeks ago, and it was with my Microsoft, and I had to take my computer into Office Depot, and they had to completely redo my hard drive and everything, because somehow something got into my computer and caused 3 of the 5 operating programs to malfunction. And the only thing they could do was redo my computer. And I had to take off all the programs and put everything back on. It took about 24 hours to do it. And it was pure hell, watching what was happening to me. Well, then about a week after I got my computer back, I get this thing that pops. I'm working on my computer, and this thing that pops up about from Microsoft, and how my Microsoft system was a pirated system, and I had to do this and that, and call this number and everything. So since they'd asked me to call them, I did, and this guy was so convincing that I let them put a program on my computer, and effectively what it was and what he said it was and he was changing my computer screen all the time. I mean, there was so much going on there I couldn't even follow it. But he said, "You've been hacked this many times in the last 6 months," and he showed me. And of course, that could have been a scam too. These smart guys gonna. But the long and short of it was that I did let him put that thing on my computer, and what I've been meaning to do is, since I got the phone number, I kept it all. I'm going to call him and see what I'll figure out what I'm going to ask him. But I want to see how it is, and I got to double check my credit card I used to put that thing on, but it was actually $169 or something like that, and spyware protection things. I guess the higher you get in the degree of work that they do, the more they're going to cost you.
Well, it could be. Here's my thought. What I usually do when something pops up, a good fast way to kind of scope something out is take that number that shows up on your screen and just Google it. And in this day and age, a bunch of stuff will pop up right away because there's so many fraud watches and so many things. You'll find out if it's a robocaller. You'll find out real quick if it's legitimate or not. So sometimes if I'm even the tiniest bit skeptical of a message I've received, I'll do a quick Google either back on the address or the phone number or the website. And it's pretty amazing how much information you can get with a keystroke like that. And you'll know pretty quick. It'll come up on something like, scam likelies or things like that. The same way your cell phone does now. Depending on the service you have, it'll come up and tell you, even as your phone is ringing, scam likely. And it does, you don't know what it is, but they're trying to give you an alert that apparently somebody is pushing out a huge volume of phone calls. So that's a way to do it. In fact, I would encourage you, even with the company that you dealt with on that, just Google it and see what pops up. And it could very well be it's 100% legitimate. And
I hope it is.
Well, it's a good place to start.
As much as I ask Kerry questions all the time about computers, folks, but I never even thought about Googling a phone number.
Yeah,
I didn't know you could really do that. I Google a company or something like that, or a person, to find out.
The amount of information that is out there and publicly available is unbelievable, including on yourself. So there's a company out there called My Life now, and if you really want to be scary or scared, just go type in your name to My Life and look at the information that they've pulled up on you. And they've even gone to the point where now they give you a reputation score, and they tell you if you have public records for arrests or judgments or liens, it goes into all that stuff. And they're just...
And how much they charge you to do that?
Well, it's free for you to go look at if you want to protect your reputation. It's the protection racket. You pay, $49
but you're going to have to pay something, right?
You pay something because then you have a right. It hasn't reached the point where the credit bureaus, you have the Fair Credit Reporting Act, where you can go in and say, hey, this is not right, whatever you guys put on my credit report, and you can at least protest it. But in this case, since it's a commercial venture and it's not apparently yet regulated, they're just harvesting whatever's on the internet and saying, we're not saying this is right or wrong, but this is what the internet says about this person.
Bill, you're looking at your cell phone now. What are you looking at there that you're going to talk about?
I'm looking you up, Joe.
Are you?
So here is a question back to our regularly scheduled agenda, because this one fascinated me, because we're going to talk about technology. And Bill, you had written down about cell phone recordings, and I don't know that we actually covered that, but I was curious to know.
Well, I was going to talk in dealing with that. I was going to talk about a couple different things. One is that in this era of coronavirus right now, we can't visit people in assisted livings or nursing homes. So with cell phone technology or a camera on your computer, we have had this ability where you can interact with your loved ones via Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams. There's a whole variety of programs. And that's allowed us to at least stay in touch with these people inside the facilities, the families can keep in touch with their loved one. Additionally, we don't want gatherings of people. So we have been doing, in the legal community, we've been doing our hearings on Microsoft Teams here in Brevard. I have done a mediation on Zoom.
Wow.
And I've also done depositions on Zoom. So it's pretty interesting. And my thoughts here in putting this on our list was that I'm not sure all that is going to go away when the virus does. I think people have really found out how convenient this is. And for example, here in Brevard, I happen to live, my office is right by the courthouse, so it's not a big deal for me to drive to the courthouse to do a hearing. Mm-hmm. But if you lived in Melbourne Beach and you had to go to Vieira, you would probably be driving about an hour to get to the courthouse.
Yes.
Well, that's an hour there, an hour back. That's 2 hours of billable time your client's got to pay you for doing that. So if you have a 15-minute hearing, that's kind of crazy, you know.
Right.
You're paying for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Well, with this new technology, well, you know, it may make more sense from the client's perspective to just do it by Zoom.
Yeah.
And save those 2 hours of driving time that they would have to pay you for. Also, you know, we did the depositions of the witnesses. One witness was in Oklahoma, one was in Texas.
No have to fly or
Yeah,
hire
we don't have to fly out there to do them or they're fly here, you know. Again, we're saving lots of money. So in mediation, prior to COVID, there was a mandatory requirement that the parties had to appear in person. Mm-hmm. Now we can do mediations, and the last one I did, we had people all over the country who were part of the mediation. Nobody had to buy a plane ticket. Nobody had to get a hotel room. So there is some very big cost savings that can come from this technology that make it, you know, I think we're going to be seriously taking a look at how much of this is actually going to stay with us as opposed to going back to kind of the antiquated way we were doing things.
Right.
Well, can you think of anything, let's say, can you think of anything that's bad about the things that we're doing now that we probably should change?
Well, you know, certainly in a criminal case or even a civil case, you have the right to confront your accuser, and sometimes you want that in person. So I'm not so sure that we're just going to make all trials go by Zoom. I think you're going to have to come in person for an actual trial, though right now there are trials occurring across the United States all by Zoom.
Trials by Zoom?
Yeah, which
Wow.
to me is I can't even wrap my head around how to do that because you have to pass papers, there's all kinds of things. So they must be fairly simple trials.
I'm not a lawyer, but I would agree with you 100%. I don't see how you could do that because let's say if a person that's been harmed has a chance to face the accuser or they face the defendant, that might cause the defendant to cave in.
True, and you always have the right to cross-examine them, even though you could do all that by Zoom.
Yeah.
But again, you know, with Zoom, you don't know who's off camera. You know, the deposition we took of the expert witness. He, of course, was sitting in front of his computer and during the deposition could pull up all kinds of information. Mm-hmm. Whereas if he had to go to a court reporter's office, he may not have been able to do the same thing. So there are pluses and minuses to it, but I think one of the things that we're figuring out is there's a huge cost savings that comes through all this.
Well, there's cost savings and there's time savings, and it's more efficient. And to me, what's important, what's significant about doing what we're talking about is that you have sick people, people in nursing homes, assisted living places, that they really can't get out and they can't travel. And by this new technology, we've made it available for them to be more involved in the actual living of their lives. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. And they can, participate in things that you couldn't normally. I know there are certain families that have had Zoom family meetings where everybody across the country gets in and comes in on Zoom. And the interesting thing is, we had to learn all this stuff overnight.
Yeah.
It was one moment they said, okay, the courthouse is closed. And then the next moment I'm having to learn Microsoft Teams and Zoom and how all those different programs work to be able to do meetings and depositions and hearings and all that. So overnight, the curve on the knowledge of how to use this stuff has gone up through the roof.
It really is amazing how fast people have adapted to the technology. I remember talking with Steve Cusick, who's a board member, and he is a person that has done a lot of work as a professor over at FIT and has been part of that for years. And he was telling me, he said, they started having their faculty meetings and things like that. And he said, just trying to get these guys who are all brilliant, right? They're college professors, but now they're learning technology to try to, make all these meetings work. But I think that has been a plus. If there's something good that comes out of all this, that is a plus.
Well, I think a good thing is going to come out of it is if we're going to put some new stuff about our car raffle.
Oh, yeah.
And we're just almost out of time, folks. These two guys talked and have just kept me from telling people about. We are going to do the car show, folks, and it's now rescheduled for 10 October. Mark Pylock, the owner of the museum, gave us an option of a couple of dates, and we elected to take the 10 October date. Gives us a little more time to make sure that this thing is passed. But we'll be getting tickets out to all the people, and we're almost out of time, but I'm going to make sure I get this in about the raffle because it's important to us. We talked about legal things enough. I'm only kidding. All right. Bill just put his mask over his eyes. Okay, but seriously, we need your help, and if you want to take a chance on their car, and we have a Challenger, a Camaro, a Kia Miata, or a Mazda Miata, and a Kia Sportage. Mm-hmm. And tickets are $25 or $5 for $100, and you can go to what's that site?
HelpingSeniorsCarRaffle.com. HelpingSeniorsCarRaffle.com.
Yeah, we're down to 2 minutes, and we're going to talk one more minute about this. And then we'll let Bill finish out the show today.
Well, the date is a great date. If you think about it, it even sounds like a winning number, right? 10, 10, 20, 20. I mean, so yeah. It's not hard to remember. Put that on your calendar, folks, right now. You can call Kim at the office, 321-473-7770, 321-473-7770, and she'll get you connected with car raffle tickets.
And I will say this, that Kim has been really, really busy with the questions since this pandemic thing started. We're getting all kinds of questions. We've referred a lot of them to Bill, referred them to other places, but yeah, we're just about out of time. Bill, you want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, if you haven't been to the Muscle Car Museum, you definitely need to go too. Buy some tickets and get out to the event. It is definitely a must-see place.
It's nice to have Bill say something like that. We'll make sure. Did we send you tickets in the first mailing?
We did. We sold some, and yeah.
Yeah, Bill's office has been a pickup point. We're going to get him. I know we're having the inserts reprinted. This is what we call the little promo pieces, and we're going to make sure you guys have a supply of tickets, and anything you can do that helps us.
We'll get them because we're trying to get businesses and things to be $1,000 ticket sellers. So we'll see what Bill comes up with.
I like it.
All right, folks, we're out of time, and I want to thank you for listening today. We hope you've learned something. And if you got a question, you can call us at the office at 473-7770. Call us, we'll get you an answer. And I want to thank you, and please tell others about the show. See you next week.